You have Instagram run on an Android smartphone, you have it run on iPhone, Mac, Windows. So you would have its implementation across every kind of device segment that you have.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Coordinated. So we are amidst of a crazy time where we just had the end of a very massive narrative of AI and agents. Then out of nowhere, in a midnight of Eastern time zone, we saw uh, our honorable President of the United States dropping a token which just broken all the records, clogged Solana, made people millionaires, a few billionaires overnight. And followed by that, the first lady of US, she also dropped, and it kind of changed the entire narrative of the market, uh, just in a span of like 48 hours. So yeah, I think there is lots of uh, crazy things which are happening around us, and lots of speculations happening around us, which is overall good for the industry. But again, there needs to be we need to ask certain questions that okay, how much we are in it for the tech. And I put a tweet last night out of nowhere ki, hey, are we still here for the tech? I think many people interacted with it and they showed their voice ki, hey, we are there for the long term. Amongst this field, I think one very important sector is interop, because whatever we are using, whatever chains, whatever apps, and to reach that mass adoption level where your mom or my mom or my our local school friends or locality friends, for them to use crypto or to even heard of crypto other than Bitcoin, there needs to be a simplified UX and there needs to be simplified onboarding for them. I think this is what interop enables them. We'll be dive more interop uh, as we proceed with the with this episode. But before that, I'd like to welcome Skate, like a famous interop protocol, as you all know, and its founder Siddharth and the coordinator. Welcome, Siddharth. Thanks for doing this. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, man. I was always looking forward to be here. And yeah, great to be here.
Super, super. I think there are many updates which are like coming up from the Skate team just from the start of this year. We'll be like discussing about all this and how Skate is contributing to the interrupt narrative. But before that, want to know a little bit about your background. Like, what were you doing kind of before you discovered crypto, and what led you to kind of start Skate from your like experience and in the course of your journey?
Yeah, I come from like a technical background. I was doing computer science. Did get exposure to like crypto, like Bitcoin, Ethereum around 2016, 2017. Uh, I was very intrigued by the technical side of it. So as soon as the Ethereum came about, that was something that I was trying to do and did my like a early thesis project back in 2017. I should have rather just bought Ethereum. That would have played out. Actually, not sure. But yeah, at that time I got like early exposure to the space, and then post that, always wanted to enter like the trading side of things in general. At that time, the aim was more Web2 investment banking kind of stuff. So I started off like in the intersection of crypto and trading with a OTC trading slash market making firm, where I was helping mostly build the DeFi side of infrastructure as it was maturing, like right from like 2020. And then after working with a lot of institutional clients on the DeFi side of interactions, we saw a big opportunity of sort of making the whole DeFi stack a bit more efficient. So that's how like the project had got started.
Any particular problems you found in your like journey, which kind of like led to the start of Skate?
Yeah, I think in general, like the idea of DeFi was the key thing that sort of got the whole capital to flow into the space. Like in the previous cycle with the AMMs, compound, money market, then people could see a real use case where you could have like blockchain be the rails of like financial infrastructure. So that's I think what me also excited. And then there are a lot of limitations in which you can execute these things in a decentralized manner. You have a very generalized Uniswap V2 things that sort of initially started gaining traction, but there was always a road to sort of efficiency for that. And I think from my perspective, that's where I sort of see the real opportunity to sort of, if this thing can get more mature, if you could achieve a higher throughput like what we have in the space right now, you could really uh, like sort of cut down a lot of intermediaries, in the sense of like how much credit card companies charge if you use stable coins for that and nothing in a regulated manner. That's a big market that can sort of really overturn the whole financial infrastructure that you have right now. So I think that's the biggest window of opportunity that I still look into, and I focus most of my efforts around that.
Cool. I think that's like just in the start of the podcast. I gave a very short intro. Like skate falls under the category of interop space. I think one thing which I have seen the main narrative around skate is connecting all VMs. So like now that we're talking about skate, want to hear an overview or little from a non-technical perspective before we go into a technical aspect, like what is skate and if you have to define it to like to non-dev audience to start with and then gradually to technical aspects of it.
Yeah, so I think I'll sort of use like some kind of analogies synonymous to what happens in traditional computing. Like if you think of like the social apps or any of the blue chip apps for Android, iPhone, like say Instagram, for example, you have Instagram run on an Android smartphone, you have it run on iPhone, Mac, Windows. So you would have its implementation across every kind of device segment that you have. But even though, like on Android, you might want to develop in Java, in iPhone, you might want to develop in C Sharp and all. The reason like that whole structure works is that in your smartphones, in your devices where you're interacting with them, you only have the part of the code of how a user would interact with them. Like basically, how do I see my reels? How do I search for any particular user? How do I sort of like something and all like those kind of interactions? But then the heavy lifting is done by one hub backend server. Now, if you sort of just move towards the Web3 side of things now, uh, every blockchain is like in its own sandbox. So when you think of apps, we think of them to be designed in a monolithic manner where they would just run on one chain. If they run on, like say, Uniswap runs on multiple chains, but its deployment across different chains are completely independent. They're like siloed deployments and all. So we just want to take that uh, like Web 2 analogy of client server architecture and have a synonymous one for Web 3. That's what in on a high level Skate is doing. They're building a new design pattern, a new way of writing smart contracts where you can have a single app run on top of Solana and get that network effects of the DGen community who have the Phantom wallet just quickly trading on the smartphones. You can have the app run on all the EVM chains and basically have people from different ecosystems focused around different like marketing narratives. You basically get all of that users distribution. You can have the app run on Ton and you get the massive funnel of users of from Telegram. So it would feel as if a single app is running across all these different blockchains, as if it happens already in the Web2 side of things with Instagram or Angry Birds. It would basically the same. So that's the ambitious vision that we are going for. And like similar to what REST or WebSocket do for the technical audience in terms of that communication, that's where we are sort of leveraging Eigenlayer for sort of securing that communication between that user interaction part and the like the core application part by securing them with economic trust bootstrap from Eigenlayer. So ambitious vision, but I think the UX like now would be that as an app, if I'm launching, right from the day one, I will have users interacting with me from Solana, from Eclipse, from Mantle, from Ton, from all these different ecosystems. So basically, I get a massive distribution. That's what sort of Skate is sort of striving for.
Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong, if I understand correctly. Let's say, as you were taking the example of Uniswap, right? Let's say Uniswap was first deployed on ETH. Let's say if I have to deploy that on ZK Sync or on Starknet, I need to write a separate complete code base basis on their language. Let's say Starknet is the best example. Let's say Cairo. So I have written my like Uniswap code on Ethereum Solidity. If I have to deploy on Starknet, I have to again write on Cairo. Now, let's say Skate is coming in. I am writing Uniswap on Ethereum. How Skate will like deploy it on Starknet for me? If you can explain it through that.
Again, it's very similar to how it already happens in the traditional computing space, where if I have an app run on iPhone and it has to run on, say, Android, I would have only the user interaction part of the code, which is very minimalistic component, to run on in Java on Android. I have to write it in Java for Android. I have to write in, say, Swift or C Sharp for iPhone. But then my backend could be in Python or TypeScript. So there could be a single backend for supporting both the front ends, like both the devices. That's exactly what Skate enables. We have a hub chain that will be an EVM stack. So, like most of the heavy lifting of a code, like 90% of the complicated logic of, say, for Uniswap, there is a lot of like tick mathematics and everything that you have to have those libraries implemented in. All of that could be in Solidity. And then we have a generalized pattern for each chain where you have a basic settlement logic that you can use from our side. It's written in Rust, it's written in Move for Move based chains, it's written in Tact for Tron. You can just basically have a version of that like inherited and just run on top of all these chains. And then basically users will interface from those chains, but like those chains will only have a logic of how a user interacts, how we get settled. That's all. That's all the heavy lifting would be done by a Solidity contract in the first version of what we're doing. So basically, you can have an EVM app run on top of Solana in just like one click fashion.
So if we take another example, I think let's say Phantom, right? Now Phantom is on Ethereum, but imagine in a world where Phantom is only on Solana. So if Phantom, I can only interact with Solana, the apps of Solana ecosystem with the Phantom wallet. L- for one moment, let's forget Ethereum is not enabled there. They're only on Solana. How Skate will make like Phantom like EVM compatible?
Yeah.
Is
So
it?
in terms of the user interaction flow, a user would have assets on Solana itself for a particular app. He will interact with the Phantom through Phantom itself. And we see these wallets as the biggest funnel of users. They are basically the deciding factor of where the user comes in. They are that key front end. So a user will just sign an intent or like just interact to a transaction from Phantom with a Solana contract. But this Solana contract is a very minimalistic deployment on Solana, which will just hold the assets, stage them, or just do some settlement logic. But then for every interaction that you have a small overhead of basically what you do on Solana will just create an action to be executed on the actual logic, which will be on our hub chain. So that's how basically I can have these interactions come from a Phantom user on Solana, or same time I can have it come from like a Townkeeper wallet user on Ton. And for both of these interactions, there's a corresponding execution that happens on the hub chain, which holds the key logic. So if I take an example of the Uniswap side of things, there is only settlement logic that will be deployed on Solana, but this contract does not know what the price is, how the price is coming from, and all that. It will just create an action that this user wants to do a swap, but the actual execution happens for that action on a hub chain. The sort of
Hmm. I think these are a little technical in terms of thinking. I'll say I think the best way to understand these are some PPTs or some presentations. I think we'll have a session with you sometime maybe later. So that I think because if we visualize these things for a dev to build or to think will be much better. But like coming back to this, I think yeah, I think we got to analogies. I think if we take another example, which is already live on Skate, I think which is one of the biggest achievements of Skate is that is bringing Polymarket on Eclipse. So and Skate is kind of empowering that stack. So like if you can take us through the flow so that we can understand as much as we can through the conversation that how Skate is enabling the entire Polymarket on Eclipse thing.
yeah, exactly. I think that on that side, like if you think from the Polymarket side, it is only deployed on Polygon, which is so all of the liquidity that it has is on the Polygon side of things. From our perspective, we have extended them on Eclipse and Ton. So a user on Eclipse would just have assets on Eclipse in their backpack wallet, and they will interact with the front end. They will just like say sign an intent that they want to bet on a particular market. So there are like a few interactions that happen across the flow. First of all, the whatever user wants to place a bet for, like say he wants to place 10 USDC, that one particular market will end up as a yes. So he will just stage 10 USDC. He will sign the signature for that. And those 10 USDC will be staged in a contract on Eclipse. And they will stay there and it will create an action this user wants to do that. Then we have this network of like listeners or bots or fillers, whatever you call it. You call it as the execution network. They pick up these actions from different chains and do a corresponding execution on a hub chain. So in this case, our hub chain just is like an orchestration layer which relays communication across different chains, and it secures all those communications with our Eigenlayer ABS. So for that action that user wants to place, we have a, like again it will get down into terminology, but there's just like this information called task, which is this information that uh, this particular user wants to call this contract on this particular chain with this particular call data. It's just information for that. Then our AVS operator just looks at that info, attests to that. Once all the operators attest to that, it has achieved enough economic trust. Then the relayer just executes it on the chain. So in this case, the chain is Polygon. So then the actual execution happens on Polygon instance of Polymarket. And in the case of asset side of things, there is a filler network that enables these kind of implementations. So I'll later dig into like the phase 1 and phase 2 of our vision. The Polymarket implementation falls into the phase 1 category, where we just do upstream integration on top of these blue chips. So Polymarket does not need to change a single line of code. It's like an upstream integration on them. It's like any other user is interacting with them. But the best point of this implementation is that right now, when a user on Eclipse has placed a bet on Polygon, on Polymarket, the assets that bet token are in a Gnosis safe for the user, which has only one signer, which is our Eigenlayer AVS relay. So in a way, like the custody of all the assets is with the Eigenlayer AVS that we have built. That's what sort of enables the cross-chain side of things. And then, like once the actual bet has gotten placed, the filler who provided the assets on the Polygon side of things through a callback from our Eigenlayer AVS, the filler, the asset that was staged on Eclipse in a contract, they get moved to a filler's wallet. So that's basically where how a filler can enable interactions from any chain to any other app. And we recently announced like we have got like these major trading desks uh, like Salini, Toka Labs, Flowdesk, Caledon, and all. And these guys would sort of enable us to sort of do a lot more of the capital intensive use cases also. So imagine that you were farming or you were like just buying set from Memecoin or Solana, but you see a good yield tokenization, fixed yield opportunity on Ethereum on Pendulum. You can just sign an intent. The filler can handle like even like a half a million kind of liquidity, and he can basically enable you to sort of get that fixed yield opportunity on Ethereum in one click. That's the kind of vision that we have.
Just like as you were giving analogies of lots of like hub or spoke kind of a model, if I understand it correctly, was the like design inspired by Cosmos interchain thesis, or are you guys using the Cosmos SDK somewhere in the stack?
Uh, Not really. I think in general, like the reason for the hub and spoke, why we sort of took that kind of design pattern is that uh, if we go with a generalized approach, then it becomes more of an academic problem because if I have to enable any to any kind of communication, then an AVS operator on Skate will have to have a knowledge of what's happening on every chain. Then you basically become full node. Every operator is like a full node of every chain. That becomes super heavy. And then like either you solve it with like ZK, like which I think Polygon Aglayer is working towards that, but it gets a lot more complicated. With the hub and spoke, you can generalize these things that I have this hub chain that is like state machine for these interactions that will just hold like the core logic, the core application state. But this state can be made accessible to every chain. So I think if you want to understand, like I think I'll give another kind of use case for it that would later be like enabling. So if you think of these ZK TLS protocols like Opacity, ZK Pass, we claim a few good teams are working across that realm. But what they do is basically they bring some kind of information from like the Web2 side of things and they put on chain through a soul bound NFT, like information. So Right now, if say I put that information on say Ethereum and I want to use it at a smart contract level, like something like I get a credit score. If someone has a good credit score, I want to give him a lower APY on borrowing, something like that. But now I have that soulbound token on Ethereum, so it's only usable on Ethereum. What if now say like Monad launch, Parachain launch, I want to use that information on that. Then I have to replicate all that metadata on one chain onto another chain. And then a new chain launch, then you have to replicate all of that things again. That's where like the whole model is broken. So if you have to in general sort of put what Skate is trying to do, we are trying to bring interop at the app level. Like right now, when people think of interop, it would be that there would be two steps. First step is you bridge certain asset onto the new chain. And the second step is you interact with the native app on that chain. Skate is sort of turning this in a single step where you just in a single click do an interaction on each other chain at an app level. So you have interoperability embedded at the app level. And that is what like we are only able to achieve if we go with the hub and spoke kind of thing. Otherwise it would get like super like
Awesome. I think this we can deep dive a little later about that bringing interoperability at the app level, because that is what matters for users perspective, because a lot of the interop part which I have thought of or the protocols I've read, it's very for the dev audience. Like you do cross VM things, or you can call contracts of a separate language from this language. They're very like dev focused things about the interop part. But I think, as you mentioned, like the examples we are talking about, let's say uh the Phantom example, that you can use Phantom on a chain which is not already it's live. Let's say on the Ton chain, for example, if we can use Phantom, I think that what matters, because let's say some token launched on the Ton network, you have a Phantom with some assets. I don't have to have the overhead of bridging, paying the gas of the separate chain or something like that. And on the other front, the chain which will be integrating that, they can have the users of the other ecosystem. So I think that is the ultimate cross communication about what interop brings. Uh, I think moving on to the next part of the big protocols which are working with Skate. I think Soon had a launch recently. Basically, the execution engine is on Solana. I think they are using some decoupled SVM architecture, and they're using the settlement on Ethereum and Eigen as DA. It's a very innovative way of thinking of the architecture. But where they're using Skate, and if you can talk about that partnership, like how Skate is coming in their architecture.
yeah. So I think like from our perspective, we work more closely with the project teams and we basically enable these apps on like I work closely with the app project teams and we enable them across different ecosystems. So Soon is like a very promising ecosystem. But again, if you think of a use case like Polymarket or Pendle, they would have more liquidity and like more stuff on the EVM side of things, for example. But if for a user on Zoom who's interacting with the native apps also can have an opportunity to sort of interact with Polymarket prediction markets or Pendle yield tokenization wars, we enable it on Soon in one click. You have your assets on Soon, you just do one click, you interact with an app on some other chain. So we like I think so far like how I perceive things is that like the ecosystems used to be protagonist of the whole thing, where you have this chain has done marketing, build community in this particular way, and then it attracts app. We are just trying to do it like the other way. We are making apps the protagonist, where if your app finds a product market fit, we can basically enable you on every chain. So at this particular aspect of Solana has a lot of like attention at this point. A lot of people are keeping a lot of money there, but you still want to interact with other stuff on other chains. We can basically say enable some other interesting product on like by you just being having your assets on Phantom on Solana, just in a one click interaction. So that's how basically we perceive things. And Soon is a very promising ecosystems. And I think from what I understand, they're more like an OP stack. So they might have SVM L2 on top of I think Solana also, and also maybe on top of Ethereum ecosystems, and might even have on top of other promising LOS. So from our perspective, it's just sort of helping them. in terms of bootstrapping the ecosystems. And then many of these blue chip apps that might be restricted to one ecosystems, we get the distribution of soon towards them, and sort of having the users interact with them in a seamless way.
I think a very like a new kind of thing for me, at least you brought up, that is uh, ho- you bringing apps to chains. So basically, if I'm thinking correctly, let's say Pump.fun, which is I think only on Solana. Now they are not very much in trend, but let's say after all this meme fiasco, Pump.fun again goes crazy. Now, can Skate bring Pump.fun to base? Is it possible technically?
We can enable one-click token deployment on Pump.fun in later in the future. That's our plan. Like
So we can use in base, right? We can use Pump.fun in base basically.
exactly, you can have
Hmm.
a one-click way from the base. Like yeah, how the thing is that like in terms of especially this was happening a lot on the EVM side of things where a lot of roll-ups were coming up. There was a period where they were incentivizing heavily, so it had a lot of traction. But then you found some other player which had deeper pockets who were incentivizing more, so the capital and the users just migrated that ecosystem, and that cycle repeated a few times. But then what about an app who had all its information, all its users on say one chain, but now that chain has gone out of favor, but it's very difficult for that app to sort of migrate to another chain. Like this was happening with I think friends.tech before it sort of got shut down. Like it sort of was falling out of favor. It had some issues with I think base from what I remember. But then they had to sort of migrate to their own chain. They were thinking of that, but then it's a lot of metadata. How do you migrate old users' data into a new chain if you sort of go out of favor? So that's where I think it has happened with a lot of ecosystem apps from what we have seen. But with Skate, you don't have to worry about that. If your app can find a product market fit, we can bring you users from every ecosystems in one click way. And people usually underestimate the effect of that. Like if there is someone who's trading meme coins through a phantom wallet on their smartphone, if you have built a great app, but if it's a friction for them to say they have to get a laptop, install a MetaMask wallet in that, like store the private key and then bridge the assets, then migrate. There's a lot of friction point that stops the user from doing that. But if I can just do it inside Phantom itself, I can enable in one click. That sort of is like breaking down those steps, removing those barriers can actually bring the new users to you. So that's how we are focusing our strategy.
Yeah, I think that is that is I think how it should be. I think as you mentioned, on top of my mind, I think only Friends Tech is coming, but I'm sure there must be many apps which which could be saved if they could move to a better ecosystem. I think Axie Infinity were also some sort of that, right? Like they if they were
Ronin has a lot of users, but I don't.
mm, yeah, but
Yeah,
there was some exploit with them and the entire thing got like dumbed down basically.
exactly. And I think it's
Yeah.
not just for the apps that have like not gained, like sort of lost favor or something. Even if you look at the blue chips, like for Polymarket also, like prediction markets is a bit more of the fatter tail side of things. You don't have that much liquidity. But if I have to have a Polymarket deployment like siloed on every chain, then it would be a very bad UX. Because for
Correct.
one market, if you break it down into different chains, like it will become super illiquid. So that's where I think you need to have a single state machine, a single place where it has all the information. And then the users could come from any chain. So that's where you need a solution like what we are trying to do.
So Skate is kind of being that state machine. If I'm
It is right. So this is the phase one side of things. In the phase one side of things, we just do an upstream integration on top of them, and Skate acts like an orchestration layer. So in the case of Polymarket, what Skate stores is basically this information that for this particular Ton user or for this particular Eclipse user, this is the Gnosis proxy on Polygon. And like whenever like an action user does, he just signs an intent. That intent can get verified on Skate. So for our hub chain, we are adding these precompiles for verifying what we call as ED25519 signature, because Solana has a different encryption standard. Ton also uses that, and EVM is ECDS standard. So we can add that logic into our chain to sort of verification by having precompiles on our chain. So we do that on our side. And then like from that mapping only, like a task will be created. This intent that users actions generate to a conversion of task or basically which particular NOS is safe to call. And basically then the custody of it is like completely with the ABS because all these NOS is safe are being owned by our ABS. So it's just the orchestration of that part of it, which enables us to have phase one more like chain abstraction with an added component of eigenlayer custody plus like enabling on alt VMs. That's what the phase one side of thing is. Phase two is where it becomes the state machine, where it's like you only store the state on skate chain and then it's accessible at the smart contract level on the D chain. That's what the phase two would be enabling. I think, look at it deep into a bit on that, on what would be the first tab that we will be building across the phase two side of things.
But I think I generally ask the question about the roadmap later on. But as we are discussing, I think this is the perfect time. I think if you can just point up, I think you elaborated it little like in depth. We'll love to know more of that. But if you can give a little analogy how Skate is at the moment currently, because we have already talked about the use cases about the Eclipse and also the Soon VM part, Soon chain part. But like want to know like from you, like where Skate is currently, a few use cases we discussed, but anyway, if you double down on that, the possibilities of Skate at this moment, and we can't say the end goal, but let's say 1 years or 2 years from now, how you're envisioning Skate and what all can be possible in the Skate verse.
Perfect, perfect. So I think to go about that answer, I'll first sort of go over the different tech components that enables what we're trying to do. So we mainly have three key Legos. One is our hub chain. So that is ready. That is an Ethereum EVM L2 based on the OP stack with added customizations on top of it. The second component of our tech stack is our Eigenlayer AVS, which enables this cross-chain communication from the hub to any other chain, secured with economic trust. So on that side, a lot of refinements. There will be like multi-phased launch, but the first phase of that is ready. Code freeze is done. We have done a lot of optimizations, a lot of development across how the BLS signature verification and everything would be working. So that's the second component. The third component is one of the most important ones of the execution network. Like in this phase one kind of interactions, we need to enable a lot of capital intensive use case. Like someone wants to LP $1 million from Solana to Base in one click. How do you do that? And that's where we sort of bootstrap the whole thing ourselves. But then now we have onboarding a lot of DeFi trading partners and all who can enable us this in one click. So that would be the third part of the system. So we are onboarding a lot of these DeFi trading partners, and we did a recent announcement around that. So all of these are sort of ready in the first phase. And from our side, there are three VMs that we currently support other than EVM. They are Non-VM, Solana VM, and Woof VM for the both the movement and the Sui stack. So I think in terms of our roadmap, the next few weeks would be around the phase one of our launch, where Polymarket was just one of the app. We are, I think, partnering up with 20 plus EVM apps and would be enabling them in one click across these different ecosystems. We'll be later announcing them one by one. And then the phase two side of things will also keep going in parallel. But for phase two, I think in the coming weeks, we would put out a white paper and more technical documentation around AMM that we are building. And if you have to imagine that AMM, like consider that there would be a lot of tokens that trade. Like if I just look at ETH stablecoin pair, it would have liquidity across AMMs on every chain. Like EVM side only, there are like 50 chains which will have liquidity for it. Then it's traded on Solana, other chains, and also. But you have independent pricing curves everywhere. Like if you do a big swap on Manta, it does not affect the price on Base. So if a big swap happens, the price will only move on Manta, then there is a MEV arbitrage opportunity. So there's a lot of information asymmetry because these are siloed deployments on every chain. Skate will solve that. Skate will have this thing where you only have the user interaction part of code on every chain, but that pricing curve would be on our hub chain. So with that, if I have, say, like 10 million liquidity on Arbitrum, and I have just like 100K liquidity on a new emerging L2, if you do a swap on that emerging L2, you wouldn't get a price and slippage as if you're trading on a 100K pool. but rather as if you're trading on a 10.1 million pool, because there's a shared pricing curve between Arbitrum and so that could be a complete game changer. And similar to what, say, like EigenDA is for AVSs, like the pet application, which defines how you write an AVS, who sort of implements every new change that comes with, like, say, rewards or slashing and everything. Like our AMM would be our first stateless application. Like phase two is about that stateless application. We consider chain abstraction as phase one, and phase two would be the stateless application. So that would be our pet applications that defines how you build these stateless applications. So a lot of technical things coming. I think a lot of things we're trying to also build a bit in the open. Like I think I was going to push a very technical article about RABS, how the signature verification, how the Merkleization of, if say we want to build a high throughput ABS, what are the limitations of that? How we sort of trying to handle that and everything. But then all of that became unglamorous with the drum thing. But I think soon we would be sort of putting a lot of info about that also.
Yeah, I think as I was mentioning throughout that, lots of important announcements are coming up from the skate team recently. I think one such thing is the skate execution layer, which recently popped up. I think that's really technical, at least for me. But if you can like shed some light on that blog, like what's the scale execution layer and like how it's kind of fitting in the entire roadmap and kind of making the interop space more seamless and like helping all the apps and the protocols.
Yeah. So for us to embed that interop at the app level, we need these counterparties, as we call as executors, who would basically hold inventory on both the chains and enable this one-click interactions. So with Polymarket, it's still not that capital intensive because we were capping bet sizes. So if a lot of people are trading, then you would run out of assets on Polygon because they are getting used up. But then you can rebalance with the inventory you are building on Eclipse or Top between them and sort of do that. But it won't be that capital intensive. But if we have to do something like Pendle, for example, holding, like if I have an LP in 1 million, then I need a filler or an executor to sort of hold 1 million on, say, base for me for that vault. And then a person will LP from Solana, but in the same click, like you get LP'd. So basically, filler gets 1 million on Solana for providing 1 million plus some fee, like he would make some fee on base. So to expand that, to make it even more seamless, we need to onboard a lot of partners. And that's what we were working on, how we can make this super easy for them to be onboarded on and sort of interact. So that's where, like we were announcing. And I think the implications of this will be huge because, as I said, I think people really underestimate, like if you can make a two-step process into a one-step process, that friction reduction can actually onboard a lot bigger set of users. So that's what this could enable. You could be on your favorite chain, you could be on your favorite wallet, but then you can interact with the blue chip apps on other ecosystems, and especially however we're pitching it in the sense of across other VMs, because wallets are the key friction points where people have friction of understanding how a MetaMask works if they were working on Phantom or something. So I think that's the realm what that execution network would enable us. And having these major partners would sort of help us scale to like way more capital intensive use cases.
On that front, I think one important aspect is the skate protocol, right? I think since it's a permissionless open protocol like all most other Web3 applications, there needs to be some permissionless development on that. Like both on the like mainly on the developer front. I think we talked intensively about the existing protocols for building on Skate. There are documentations and all obviously, but what will be your advice to new developers or like advanced developers who are not actually protocols themselves, but for the dev audience, both the young and the matured ones, how they can start with the skate, like some applications which they can spin up or they can use skate or can try out new things for them.
Yeah, I think for this one, a lot of effort has been going on from our side in terms of the documentation side of things. Like what we are building is, I think the most ambitious part of it is that a lot of these different VM stacks are designed in completely independent way. They have completely different tooling. They have a completely different structure. Like Tom was like a complete beast when we were trying to integrate it, because if you imagine, like on the EVM side, if I have to do something complicated, like say my function can be calling 6 7 different smart contracts and getting that state and sort of doing something. Most EVM contracts are designed to sort of do internal function calls, but in Ton, every smart contract is its own blockchain. So if you do an internal function call, it goes into the next block, then next block. So if I have to do anything, even Uniswap V2 level, that might be 5 6 internal function calls. So it would take me, a block is like 5 seconds, so 25 seconds for that to go through. So you can't design it in like an EVM specific way. So you have to do a lot of nitty-gritty. So I think a lot of time was spent on that part from our side. But now that everything is robust and running actively, we would be putting a lot of technical literature out there in terms of how to build these stateless applications on top of Skate. And then would be doing this like dev spaces. So we would have these different tracks across developer communities, across the startup with India. Then would be a lot of other regions that we bootstrap that communities. And then through them, like with active feedback, would be like, we want you to say build this basic plugin, but as you are building is, give us active feedback on what else do you need in documentation that could have fast track your process. So with that, we would be sort of going about it. But I think this one is something that we need to do a lot of work on, and I think it's is happening internally, and then there would be a big push happening when we sort of push this out with these 20 plus apps that could be going live from our side.
Yeah, I think like the current market situation we are in, until and unless a negative black swan event happens, I'm seeing like at least for the next 1 year there is lots of mindshare which crypto has. And like every bull market, I think this is the best time to onboard new users and also devs. So I think so the kind of vision which you envisioned with Skate and the things which are coming up, like with the technicalities, with the protocols which are actually live, if there is a dev uh program or like a dev platform with Skate, I think that will like be beneficial a lot to the Skate protocol, because you guys are for sure you guys are going to see many new innovations which maybe internally you haven't thought of, because all these developers they will be coming with their own thoughts and experiences.
Completely agree. Completely agree. And I think like right now, we feel we are very well positioned to sort of do that, in the sense that I think the mind share for alt VMs, especially Solana and Move ecosystems, have been growing very fast. So we want to enable those developers to basically see the synergies between the EVM apps and them, and then basically build these plugins for us to basically make anything on any chain be extendable and accessible across every ecosystems. That's the key vision.
Awesome. I think I would have ended the podcast right here, but as I mentioned, want to jam a little bit about the interop space. Because the main reason is, as we were talking, this is one of the very important sectors for the crypto ecosystem, and it enables almost everything we use at this moment. So, coming to the interop space in general, just want to know a little bit about your overview. I know it's a little bit of abstract question or a very high level question. Like, what do you currently think about the interop space in 2025? Like, the reason of asking is because we have been seeing a lot of developments which have happened in 2024. So, in general, like, what are the things which you saw which interop has solved for us in the entire like till 2025, and a few things which we can look after in the interop space in this year particularly.
Yeah, I think in general, like for the Web3 side of things, now the core stack is ready. Like if you look at different ecosystems on the EVM side of things, you have a few L2 stacks that are super robust. OP stack is great, Arbitrum Nitro is great, Polygon CDK is also great. Similarly, I think on Solana side now also, there's so many new, like Soon has one, Eclipse is doing great. And I think there's going to be So Near, which has that infinite SVM. There's going to be Fogo, which is like Fire Dancer version of Solana, going to be super high throughput and all. So the different tech stacks that are coming, but again, now in terms of if you want to run in like this monolithic fashion across siloed environments, everything is sort of reliably robust there, and you don't need to do much innovation on that part. Now, I think next stage of innovation is basically these are siloed environments. How do I make them feel as if it's a single environment? So that's where I think a lot of mindshare will go in terms of making things seamless, making things feel as if it's a single environment altogether and all. That's what we are working on. I think there are a lot of great teams like I think different kind of standards are coming up in the sense of like first like assets, like layer 0 has that OFT standard. Hyperlane has make this MOAP token which is like NOS on tech and self. Wormhole as entity. So there would be teams who would be specializing on the asset side of things, for sort of enabling assets across different chains. Then there would be teams who would be enabling the movement of this asset with across, which uses a filler kind of model, Squid Router doing pretty great work, and all like similarly. But in the end, I think it will come down again to even after that, if there is friction, there is like if there's step 1, step 2, step 3, then users will be like, okay, I'll leave it. I don't have this much time and all that. So I think eventually a lot of projects would be evolving into this kind of regime. And more than that, I think even if I've like from the project teams that I've talked to, those who have found a good product market fit and have a high throughput use case, why would they be competing for block space when there's so many different tech stacks enabled? Like they would just want to make monetize on that side of it also. I think Nick from Celestia posted a great thread of like there's a path where how much friction you have in terms of launching your own chain versus how much value you can accrue by launching your own chain. At some point, once you find a product market fit, it makes sense to sort of not fight for block capacity and just sort of have your own, like, sort of monetize that part of it also. So that theoretically makes sense, but then you lose the audience of those general purpose chains that you are on. So personally, I think it's a big monosome that I'm putting, but I'm at in midst of the theme of like I don't see how general purpose blockchains will evolve in the future, because if they have great apps, it's in their favor to sort of go and have their own app chain. But if they do that, then they lose the general purpose chain, massive audience that sort of interacts with the other apps also. So I think the the answer for that would be the rate at which these interop solutions develop. If I can go and have my own app chain, but interop would make it feel and have it my app be accessible on all the general purpose chains also, then I think the innovation will move quickly towards that kind of model where every good app will have its own chain. Uh, Otherwise, I think like it would be just that those monolithic environments that can scale better, like Solana, like Hyperliquid and all, they will keep getting more mindshare over time.
I have one curious question on that part. Like interop slash modular has mainly like these two massive TG mainly. One is the user, one is the dev front. Like how realistic are we to this user experience? Like if I define it a little bit, let's say there's an app, right? There's a Web3 app, and there is all these VMs, chains, abstractions, intents, AVSs, and all this entire thing of like Web3 ecosystem behind this one thing. There is an app. I come, I click. I don't know what is happening. I just get the user experience. If I just give you a simple example, let's say Polymarket. If I take it in that way, there is a Polymarket app in my phone. I come, I speculate, uh, and it's over. So there is no need to kind of. I think we need to think how to broad the tokens in those wallets first, because I think wallet will be analogous to this emails or Apple logins. We will have that wallet IDs, simplified version of it. There will be an app like Polymarket. We use it just by like just by connecting with it, and the entire thing is happening behind it. And by Polymarket, I don't just mean Polymarket, but advanced Polymarket, or the Polymarkets of the future, which has ZK, FHE, and all these cryptographical things enabled. Want to know how closer we are to that future from a user standpoint?
Uh, I think uh, there first of all different kind of trust models that form. We still don't know which one would evolve to be the leader. Like I think Eigenlayer and economic trust is one trust model. So how I personally see these things is that if say I want to do any off-chain thing, like if I want to get a state of a particular blockchain, so I need to run a full node. But if only I run a single full node, and then it gets centralized because it's just one point of failure. But if I run that full node with 100 operators with economic trust attached to it, then it considered relatively trustless. So that's the economic trust model. Are people fine with that for trading more capital intensive use cases? Or they need at least GK, or they need at least some kind of L1 kind of validator, bigger validator network, for example, to sort of go about it with economic trust of the plus the reputation side of it attached to it. Like usually these validators have a reputation risk also if they were to go malicious, and also the different trust models to it. I think ZK, we are still far off from achieving any kind of like for doing anything of the scale of what Trump and Melania meme coin were on like something where there's an overhead for every transaction for some kind of ZK verification. We are pretty far off from that. So ideally, if we go towards that UX specific path, I feel it would be a bit more centralized models that we go for. So that's where I think initially a lot of FUD would come across that realm that look at this. Like these parties can just like there are a lot of FUD regarding hyperliquid validators recently. Like you can attack a few parties and then the whole thing can go down. But still, I think users are fine with it. Users sort of put a lot of money there. It's a super awesome product, great UX and all that. So I think it's more of a mindset that I cannot figure out at this point that which particular trust model do people settle for and interact with. If it's lower, then I think what we have already will definitely mature, will get more liquid, but it's still in general interop. How I see is like a two-step process. You have to do a transaction of going to that chain, and then the second interaction of interacting with the native app there. I still feel that has to become one step. And the few teams who are working on this side, we are also one of the players on that side. So we want to have a hand in terms of especially like doing something cross VMs for this space. Uh, to be honest, I cannot tell at this point how it might play out. So far, the winners look to be the monolithic infrastructures, if I candidly answer. But if we can bring these like more of these roll up apps across different ecosystems in one click, I think then it would get a lot more seamless. So that's what we are trying at our end. Uh, and yeah, not much to
I
add.
think that there is a little flaw in my question itself about how much the time frame will it be when it's possible. But the ideal question should be like how easy it will be for user. Like basically there are so many things, and each of the ecosystems and each of the apps has its own layer and its own thing. Like just as you mentioned, Eigenlayer has its trust model. I'm sure all the apps, all the protocols don't need as extensive trust model as Eigenlayer. Somebody will use ZK. Maybe you're far away from that, but it is like it can be ZK. I think for us who are in Web3 24/7, for us only it is a little bit problematic to keep all this siloed things which are happening in their own territory in this all development and everything. But I think there must be something which must be for the end user as a package system, which is there. Like I want to interact with this Web3 application. I think prediction markets are they are in Web2, but Web3 offers a new kind of prediction markets with all the benefits of it. But even if I have to interact with the prediction market, we have to think, okay, which chain, which app, which token needs to be there. This chain, is it using a ZK to verify the result, or is it using a crypto economic security? So I think the question should be more like that. Like, can we have a one user interface down the line where just like I just want to use just something and it's there for me. Is it? Are you envisioning that in any near time future?
Yeah, I think like if I have to look at the past 12 months, like themes that have worked, the most common thing across all of them is that they just made the whole thing a bit one click, like for the user. Like if you look at, there were a lot of launchpad platforms, but Pump.fun was in one click, you just launch your token. If you look at even the AI space, so Eliza framework has a lot of these functionality. You can do add plugins, you can do a lot of things. But virtual side, it's just one click. So basically, then virtuals definitely has a lot more traction than a few of the Eliza ones that are out there. So in general, like market is sort of telling in that point, like whatever products get funding in the future and all would be across this of what already works right now. So the common theme that we are seeing is that market values simplicity. Things are getting super complicated and over. So users should not feel that. So if you see that virtuals is doing pretty well, Pump.fun is doing super well, and a lot of these one-click things are doing super well compared to the more complicated ones, then definitely that's where the market will evolve into. Those would be the projects that would be able to gain access to capital and users a lot quicker.
I think on the other front, about from the users is the other devs. As we are anyway discussing about the dev part, like there are so many ecosystem each has its own benefits and own set of things. Let's say this, as you're mentioning, the Move ecosystem and the Rust-based ecosystem, they have this own set of developers. There is Solidity-based ecosystem. There are this other new language or these other protocols which are offering here. You just can deploy anything in TypeScript also. But I personally think there must be at least one, not even one, there must be a few entry points for devs, because even for devs to come in, they're lost that which chain needs to be picked up. And there are in Ethereum itself, there are like 5, 6 L2s, major L2s, and they are lost. Where to start? Since you are building in the space for a decent amount of time and Skate is like one of the very prominent protocols in the interop space, can we have a minimal entry points for these devs? But at the back end, there are all these ecosystems which are there. Like my thing is, let's not remove the ecosystems, because these ecosystems, they have their own expertise. Each stack has their own magic and everything. But can we have some minimal entry points for devs, a collective approach? Like, is it possible if this ecosystems cross collaborate with each other and do some hackathons or do some onboarding activities together for devs? Or there must be some technical aspect towards it that, hey, even if you're using a OP stack, you might get the security from the Eigenlayer. Or let's say if you're using a Solana, uh, you can still settle on Ethereum. So what do you think should be the approach to for us to bring in devs in the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think for having like a, I think like it's more about like that thing of jack of all, master of none kind of thing. Uh, Solana would have completely different tooling, completely different apps, completely different way of writing smart contracts compared to what you do on Ethereum or EVM side of things. So coupling them at that level would only make you like not being good in either in a way. I think like that's sort of the way around. I understand like what the point you're saying. I think that's like once we started approaching apps that say we are building this thing with Skate, what do you guys think? We would love to work with you guys and expanding your ecosystem. I think from our side, what we saw was that the biggest market was that Solidity definitely has a lot of mind share. There are a lot of good app teams there who are sort of having not that great adoption because of that fragmented UX, whichever ecosystem they are on, and they are sort of just trying to go into a new one, get something from a foundation, then jump to a new one. Just keeps trying to stay relevant. But if we can enable them on Solana, they see like there's a massive user base. But if they have to do it themselves, it's a massive code restructuring that you need to do. There's a completely different way you have to interact across those things. So that's what Skate like sort of how a go-to-market strategy sort of later on formed. That the biggest market for us initially would be that a lot of capital intensive use cases, a lot of innovation across different sites like algorithmic stable coins, RWA yield tokenization that happens on the EVM side of things. But they want to get the user adoption from the Solana side, but they can't do the whole like restructuring to Rust, for example, for that side. And that's where I think we said that, okay, we will have this common design pattern. You don't have to do much on Solana side. We will help you get the user base interactions. You can keep all your innovation end-to-end development mostly on the Solidity side of things, but you can interface with Solana users. You can interface with Movement users. And that's where they find the biggest value. And that's how our ecosystem sort of growed over time, which would be sort of going live one after the other in the coming days. So I think uh, it's similar to like Web 2 also. Like Rust in general would not have that many developers as would be C++ or Python, because like there's different kind of technical materials and all. And if you are a Python developer, if you have to Rust, is still a big work that you have to do, because it's a different kind of way of writing everything. So yeah, I think it would come down more in terms of abstracting these things than sort of relaying these things to users, is what I feel for.
Awesome. I think super thanks, Siddharth, for doing this. I think there are a lot, many intricate details we have to discuss about the interop space because uh, like I don't know like why the narrative isn't picking up that much, but interop is the one of the I think it's the important narrative because without interop, there are so many ecosystems as of now. There is like simple meaningless to like use crypto at this moment because from the like how systems were in last cycle, it was mostly centralized things where you could have used things over there as you were mentioning in the beginning of the podcast. But now with all these siloed ecosystems with wallets and gases and everything, there must be a uniformity. I think interop is the thing for that. Then we touched on a little bit what Skate does and the interop and like discussed about your thoughts of the interop thing. But I'm sure I'll be inviting you again very soon to jam more on the technicalities of Skate about the architectures and how actually things are working under the hood so that more people can understand and can come to you and build stuffs over there. And also, can be one separate episode about the interop thing as a whole, like starting and where we are currently, and a few other people who are also building in interop space, and we can jam to find a real solution out of this. So, thanks again. Super thanks for joining in. I'm looking forward to host you again very soon.
Great chatting with you, man.